Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Collaversation version 2.0. And similar format as version 1.0, we're doing two recordings in parallel. The longer form that's basically just hit record and let it run without pausing, other than when someone requests a pause and then we pause all recording. But short of that, this version right now that we're recording, the Collaversation, and these get posted as two separate YouTube videos. The Collaversation is the shorter one, Collaversation is the longer one. We'll be stopping and starting this one. So here on the Collaversation, what we are undertaking is successive iterations on a very concise expression of both a new story for humanity and the most urgent solutions and the pathway to accomplish all of these solutions, all under this new story. And so the Collaversation is different successive iterations of the Collaversation, the shorter form, it's like a constant refining process, refining until we get it right. Think of a ballet dancers just starting out and then doing a dance over and over and over until they get it perfected. That's what we're up to here. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share and do some sketching here of more precisely what I'm talking about. So we're creating, first of all, a mashup of two words, collaboration and conversation. This is a collaborative conversation. Mash these two up and we get collaversation, which is the long form. And a subset of that, and I'll use subset notation, is the collaversation, which is more concise. And the ultimate goal of this is to refine and refine and refine until we get to what I'm calling a concisation, which is the most concise. It's not only the most concise, but it's the most refined form of what exactly? The what is a new story for humanity that can go out not just as a meme, but this is kind of a new kind of meme. It's a new story for humanity in conversational form, right? In other words, it doesn't just go out as, hey, watch this video, but it's more like, hey, let's have this conversation. That's the concisation, and I refer to it as the concisation because the goal is to come up with a singular concisation, which includes, yes, it includes a new story for humanity. It also includes the key solutions that we must implement in order to save, heal, and transform life on Earth. To save, heal, and transform life on Earth. That's the goal. And so let's have the collaversation, and capturing the long form here, collaversation, to get there. So I'm going to start out with kind of just some, essentially some context. And the context is that we have, among myriad other problems, I would say the two most urgent problems for us to solve to even have a crack at the big goal, right? I'm going to change this up a little bit up here. What is the goal? The goal is to save, heal, and transform life on Earth. So the two most urgent problems that we need to solve in order to even have a crack at achieving our goal of saving, healing, and transforming life on Earth, we have exponential planetary overheating, and we have the destruction of the biosphere. Okay. These are the two biggies. I'm going to go off screen share for a minute to talk about this. The planet is overheating exponentially to the extent that perhaps within a couple of years or so, it will be so hot that we'll have massive crop failures, massive sea level rise, extreme weather, like even more extreme than we've seen in the last year, the last 12 months. And this exponential will continue until we're maybe, I mean, the last time we saw anything like this was like 300 million years ago, I think, in the Pliocene. Guy McPherson covers it extensively. I don't try to remember all the terms and exact dates, but temperatures spiked in a matter of years on the order of 10 degrees centigrade, right? And at last count, Professor McPherson has identified no fewer than 67 self-reinforcing feedback loops, all driving this and nothing opposing it. So the good news is that we have the means to stop this mad exponential and actually reverse it. And there's a singular set of levers that are all under the umbrella of SRM, solar radiation management, which we can throw. Which levers within that umbrella of SRM, we can talk about that and we can figure out what's the optimal mix. But the bottom line is we have the means to stop it, right? And in the other parallel problem, which is both caused by, to a large extent, exponential planetary overheating, but also causing exponential planetary overheating, is the destruction of the biosphere. So it's its own mega self-reinforcing feedback loop. The planet's overheating, therefore the Amazon, Australia, California, Greenland, parts all over the world are susceptible to drying out and becoming a tinderbox, and very susceptible to wildfires, forest fires, etc. And so the planet is burning up. Because the Amazon is burning, it has become, and because it's so dried out and so devastated, again, largely because of exponential planetary overheating, but then of course you have a bunch of human beings setting fires and chopping down forests and converting the Amazon to animal agriculture. Because you have a lot of that going on as well, you really have two things driving the destruction of the biosphere. You have exponential planetary overheating, which is driven by a whole bunch of factors. And then you have intentional destruction, intentional harm caused by humans. Those are the two big things. I'm going to pause. All right, resuming the Collaversation. We just hit on a couple of interesting areas. One is I gave an analogy, which I've given a number of times before, about a household that has a whole bunch of problems, and I listed a bunch of the problems and this and that. And then at the end of that description, I said, and oh, by the way, the house is on fire. And all that is context for the following question. Okay, what should that family focus on right now? First step, next step. What's the immediate action item? Is it to deal with the father's drinking problem? Is it to deal with the mother's drug abuse? Is it to deal with the fact that the 3-year-old just pooped in their pants? Or is it to call 911 and call the fire department to put the fire out? Now, in that case, the answer is obvious. Call the fire department. And that's, for me, a great analogy of what we need to focus on right now for saving life on Earth. and I'll delve more into that. But as I wrapped up that little story, Ananda told us some really cool stuff, which I'd love for to invite you to share if you'd like, Ananda, or I can recap as you wish. And you're on mute.
Yeah, go ahead and recap.
Okay, so what I took away, and you mentioned a book that I've seen before but haven't read called Who Moved My Cheese? And it has to do with our personalities and dealing with change. And you used an interesting term called change personality. We all have a change personality. We're in the midst of very rapid change right now. And so each of our respective change personalities is coming out, and our personalities are interacting. And I kind of poked some fun at myself and I said, well, it looks like my change personality includes an element of, Marine Corps drill sergeant saying, we must do this, and it's urgent, and we got to do this right now. And I'm kind of laughing at myself as I say that, because that's not me and it's not who I want to be. But an element of that's coming out. Another one change personality is kind of the last minute urgent change personality. Another is the run and hide. So how do we deal with change, right? So if that was a fair recap, great. Feel free to add to it, Ananda.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not brushed up on the book right now, but they actually literally label 4 kinds of change makers. And a workshop that I used to do is I'd put a whole room of people together, and I would size them up with the kind of change making personality they had, and they all felt comfortable in their quadrant with the same kind of people that deal with change the way they do. And then I'd mix it up and I'd put the opposites together in a room and create a scenario, much just like what you just did. And the other 2 were observing. And so what that did for the group is it just helped people learn tolerance more. When I understand that your change personality has to do with just being a person that goes immediately into action, we're going to call on you on that personality type when there's an urgent need for action. We're not going to call on the person who it just wants to hide or avoid or freaks out, or anything like that. So I tell you what what you've inspired me to do is I'm go back to my old material and look up those 4 definite change personalities and come back a little more equipped. But the book is designed, it's got this maze where these little mice work their way through the maze every day, and they find their cheese, and they're all fat and comfy and the whole thing. And then one day the cheese starts to change. And so their personalities come out when they're, realizing that things are changing around them. And so the situation gets stronger and stronger, and they start living out their personality. Now, the one thing that I learned respect for in this process was that it helps you understand not only what kind of change personality you have, but what kind of change personalities the people around you have. You might want to do this little test in your family and just find out, well, what's your core change personality. But the main thing that I got from it was it helped me understand to notice when my cheese starts to change. When the change starts to happen, you can prepare yourself by understanding and knowing what kind of change personality you have. You can prepare yourself for change in a way where you can come out of the change situation with a lot less chaos and even violence than if you had not a clue about how you change or how other people change, or even the fact that the cheese is changing. And right now on our planet, the cheese is changing drastically. So just take a look inside yourself, do some studying on your change personality, and I'll come back another time, maybe even do a little workshop on it or a little a little more explanation, but permanently, what that little education did for me is help me prepare for when change is happening in my life and understanding my personal change personality and the tolerance I learned from other people about how they deal with change.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
Ananda. And yes, go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, I just wanted to share some insight that I had and kind of just reflect back to make sure that this is accurate to my understanding of what she's saying. But the insight that I gained was that there is the little bit of a difference that there is between the metaphor with the house on fire that we're working with, and that how this ties into what Ananda is saying is that, in the house on fire, I mean, the obvious reaction first is, especially with the use of cell phones, is that the people just need to get out of the house, and it's a very immediate and clear action. Whereas with the earth being on fire, the earth like having all of these issues, it's not quite as clear, right? That there is this sort of like one thing that everyone has to do in order to save themselves. And I think that with what she's saying is that there's these very clear action makers and these other three personality types, which I'm not sure what they are. I think really what our job is to do now is to really start identifying people and how they play a role in this. Like for me, I work with people in teaching emotional intelligence work and helping them deal with their anxiety or whatever is coming up. So people like me, it could be helpful for me to work with the people that are like in the freak out mode versus like someone that has a lot of energy that really has my partner, he's like, he makes an incredible amount of things happen, and he has like the energy to just keep going, and I'm just not that kind of a personality type. Like I kind of more work like a heart-based mode, and I have a few hours out of my day where I'm can really be like in work mode. So yeah, maybe I'm curious what everyone else has to add to that.
I love it. It feels to me like you just took what Ananda said and just totally built on it and said, okay, therefore, let's kind of organize ourselves and see, which firefighters need to be way up on the ladder blasting the hose, which need to be on the radio coordinating logistics, right? Which need to be making sure the kids get out of the house right now. It's kind of like, how do we divide and conquer, but also deal with the people who are in freak out mode. Those are probably not people who need to be yelled at and told orders right now, but rather they need to be, hey, let's go into a hugging circle. While these other 47 firefighters are putting out the fire, let's have a little group here for the people who are in freak out mode, something like that. Anyway, that's my immediate reaction. I'm going to pause recording now. All right, welcome back to the Collaversation, concise recording. We just had an interesting exchange, and we're planning on doing some workshops associated with Who Moved My Cheese, understanding personality types, both our own and others, especially in the context of change. And I'll screen share quickly an image that we found from the book, Who Moved My Cheese. Here it is, real quick. We got these different personality types in the context of change. And there's also a cool video that Michael shared that's in the chat. So Ananda is offering to facilitate some workshops around this for understanding our personality types. And where we took the conversation then was, hey, through this process of understanding our different personality types, we can better organize ourselves for the massive changes that are happening and that we need to invoke, that we need to make happen in order to save, heal, and transform life on Earth. So that's the nutshell recap of that, and I'm pausing. All right, welcome back to the Collaversation, and I'm going to share a couple images that I found. So this is related to the planetary overheating and the destruction of life on Earth, right? So this image represents just, your average person who's just trying to accumulate wealth and make it in the world and burn hydrocarbons, burn gasoline, build a bigger house, get a newer car, newer clothes, whatever. I don't think this person, and I think we all see a little of ourselves in this person, is setting out to destroy the planet. They just want to get ahead and win at the game they were born into, right? The game of accumulation for individual hoarding, for individual survival, as I call it. So this is very much unintentional planetary overheating and planetary destruction caused by our behavior. And again, this is behavior within a game that we were born into. I don't think any of us chose this game. It's what we were all born into. Now, intentional destruction of the biosphere is the subject of this next image, right? Here's somebody chainsawing rainforest in the Congo in this case. But this scene plays itself out, millions of chainsaws per day in millions of locations per day all around the world. And it's both to get the lumber, including very fine hardwoods like mahogany and rosewood and cedar and teak, but also to make way for animal agriculture, whether it's raising soybeans that get exported to feed livestock or open space for livestock to graze. And we're just destroying some of the most precious, fragile parts of Mother Earth in the process. So we're all familiar with that kind of larger story. So I just wanted to give some images to go with the context of these two twin phenomena: exponential planetary overheating and destruction of the biosphere. And I'm going to pause. All right, after a pause, and having looked at these scenarios of planetary overheating and destruction of the biosphere and what's driving it, let me share some images that I just sketched up. Okay, so these two problems, exponential planetary overheating and destruction of the biosphere, and of course these arrows go both ways, intentional and unintentional, as I showed in the last slides. So the big picture here, as I'm sketching, you have excuse me, sunlight coming in, which passes through the greenhouse gases, which I've shown here as this kind of brown, dirty brown color. This visible spectrum sunlight from the sun is warming our planet. And normally that wouldn't be a problem because the warming, all this heat then gets emitted as infrared radiation that goes back into space. And so the planet is constantly cooling herself off that way. The only problem is with more and more greenhouse gases, more and more of that infrared radiation is getting reflected back to the Earth. And that's really what's been the main driver over the decades of that planetary overheating, is heat that is contained and not allowed to escape because of the greenhouse gases. And then we've gotten into this very vicious cycle as rising temperatures create droughts and perfect conditions for wildfires and forest fires, which generate more greenhouse gases and also reduce Mother Earth's ability to sequester greenhouse gases. So it's a really vicious cycle. And then add to that animal agriculture, which releases massive amounts of methane and also is the main driver of the intentional destruction of the biosphere. So with all that in mind, let's look at kind of the root problem of all of this, the root problem of, and I'll just flash the images on the screen again, because we've kind of got two big expressions of our root problems. We have people trying to accumulate more and more and more, and really very focused on that, and not really focused on anyone else or anything else, much, including Mother Earth herself. So it's this imperative to hoard and to flaunt our wealth and accumulate more and more and more. That's the main driver behind exponential planetary overheating. But then you have destruction of the biosphere, where it's also being driven by that, because this guy is chopping down this tree because he needs money to feed himself and feed his family. So the image here that I want to show in terms of getting to the roots of all these problems, the root problem is what I call the all-day monopoly game of hoarding, endless hoarding. We were all born into this game, and we are all trapped within this game to varying degrees. So what are the solutions? Well, we have some very practical solutions, which, despite their practicality, are not getting implemented. And that's what we need to take a look at in a moment. But the short-term solution to planetary overheating is SRM. SRM is to planetary overheating like the fire department is to a burning house. It is the one singular solution to putting that fire out. SRM in the very short term, because the fires are growing exponentially, the planet is overheating exponentially, and we need the equivalent of a planetary fire department, which at the present moment does not exist. Right? I mean, can you imagine New York City without fire departments, without a fire department and firehouses all over the place? That would suddenly become the single most urgent thing to do in New York City, even more urgent than getting Donald Trump out of city business, is SRM, solar radiation management. Now, the long-term solution is very different from SRM. It's drawdown. Once you've cooled the planet using SRM, you can now set about long-term healing, and that is drawdown, sequestering carbon that's already in the atmosphere and reducing emissions. So if the fire department is the analogy for the short-term solution of SRM, the analogy for the long-term solution of drawdown is kind of a combination of don't let your kids play with matches and build houses with fire-resistant building materials. Those are among the best ways to prevent fires burning houses in the future, but not very good at stopping a fire once it's started. Right? For that, we need SRM. That's the fire department. So I'm just going to put SRM here, a planetary fire department. Okay. Now, in terms of the destruction of the and I put and there's something else, and this and points to the elimination of animal agriculture. That's probably the most significant long-term solution of all, as it directly impacts drawdown. Ending animal agriculture is the best thing we can do for drawdown. But it's also the best thing we can do for stopping planetary overheating as far as a long-term solution. It does not replace the short-term solution of solar radiation management, but complements it. They operate at totally different timescales. The destructive impacts operate at totally different timescales. Humanity has the potential to end animal agriculture today. So that can happen very quickly, but in terms of the impacts on planetary overheating, anything drawdown related takes time. SRM operates immediately. Now, the other major solution in terms of destruction of the biosphere both short-term and long-term, there is one far and away number one solution to ending the destruction of the biosphere, and that is ending animal agriculture, period. Getting everyone to go plant-based. Okay. So I'm just going to put numbers next to these main problems, 1, 2, and 3. We have number 1, exponential planetary overheating, number 2, destruction of the biosphere, and number 3, the all-day monopoly game that we were born into and are trapped into, which I call individual hoarding for individual survival. So now with all this on the table, I want to create a flow chart, which I'll sketch out. First, I'm going to pause.